Okay, so on to our next one. For this one, we're gonna do something a little bit more trendy, and that's all literally to create an elevated canopy. And you can see that here. And when you look down, you can see this lovely empty space, and then just the base here, which I've covered with moss. And you might think it's a little bit sparse, but the idea is literally to emphasize this canopy, and that only works when you've got this lovely empty space below. Now with the materials, you can kind of use, again, you've got to have a look and see what's available for you, but I'll show you what I've got in there. And first of all, I've got the two uprights, and I've cut these out of a sort of a bit of older hedging, really. You can see that some of the hedging now is in two layers where they haven't been cut for years, and then the new growth has come up and then it's suddenly started being cut again, so you get almost double level. And literally the supports here and here are these, and they work really well because they've got this little tuft of twigs right at the top, which is really easy to put and fix all our horizontal bits onto. And then for the horizontal bits, there are, again, one of my favourite materials. These are lovely, you have to be careful, or I have to be careful with these lichen branches. And they just create so much beautiful colour and texture. So that creates the basic part of the structure, and then it's been emphasised with some of the lovely oak buds, which is a lovely browny colour. Again, they just add a lot of contrasting texture to what else is in here, and just create a lot of interest, really. And then finally, just to round that off, I've got some ivy trails, and those we're just going to weave through the canopy. And probably also might use some of this lovely passion flower. My sister's actually got a better garden than I have, and so I make good use of just going to visit handily with a pair of secateurs in my pocket. So I just take a few of those. And again, we're going to use some lovely eggs, and I've also got these nice little commercial nests with 2 quail's eggs and a few feathers in them, which are really sweet, and some eggs. And I've kept this, as you can see, quite natural with the colouring. Everything's quite browny, yellowy, and even the dead hydrangea heads in here for a little bit of density are really nice. And then finally, I've just added some nice daffodils here at the base, and some coordinating just tulips in tubes. For the rest, I'll show you how we work through it. Now, the main thing, and you can see actually when I stand here and put my arms behind it, you can see this is something that you need a big room for, but you don't need to make it this big. You can scale this back, okay? So don't worry about that. Because some of you might be thinking, I've got to go, where am I going to find this if I don't live near a hedgerow or I don't have access to that? Don't worry, just have a look at something that you can use. That might seem really big at the moment, but what is ideal about this is that it's got lots of twigs at the side. And the nice thing about this is you can do a little bit of pruning to make it smaller. So that in effect, you're creating the same thing as what I had there. So don't feel that that's the only option. Just have a little look at while you're walking around for some little twigs. There's lots fallen down in the windy conditions we had last week. And I'm still going to make it in this big container, which is the same size as that one. But if you want to make it in a smaller container and you want to scale it down, that's not a problem. You can just do it as I say, on a much smaller scale. So if I just do that with 2 twigs here, just to show you, even though these twigs are very thick, let's just see, if you cut them to the same size in the first place, then not a problem. So cut those down a little bit. There we go. Little branches off at the bottom. And then what I'm going to do first of all, again, because these are going to carry the whole structure, I'm going to cut these at an angle on either side. So effectively, if you think of a door wedge, you can do this with a secateurs. I normally do this with my knife, but I know probably most of you that will freak you out. So yeah, don't worry, these branches can take quite a lot. And I'm just going to fine tune that a little bit just to show you what I mean, but you've got a bit more time than I have. See, so you get it just like that, like a door wedge. So it's flat on opposite sides. And then I'm just going to add those, one at one side and then one at the other. Cut that down a bit. See, I've left that long one on there, don't worry. You can always, as I say, chop more off later. And so this one I could make a lot smaller, but I'm going to go for the bigger one because you know now how to scale it down. So drop that to the side, get my big dish. But what I'm going to start again with is, I mentioned this in the last video, that these blocks of foam, they just create like this very solid lump. So first of all, again, a little bit of creative carving. Don't get stressed out. Make it asymmetrical, don't make a hole in the middle. I am making a little one in the middle, but make it as asymmetric as you can. Yeah, it just creates a little bit of an organic feel with this, which is really what we want to achieve. And move those aside for a moment. Clear the decks a little bit. Let's get rid of all that for a moment. And then we're going to start with our twigs. So I'm going to use these. And first of all, I'm going to cut them to the same size. And then, just like the previous one, I'm just going to cut them into a wedge. And the reason for that is when they're in the foam, if they're round, it's very easy for them to start moving. And because you will put a bit of pressure on it by attaching things to it, the more it moves, after a while the whole thing will start to become unstable. So this will just hold it in place and stop it from moving in the first place. Push it right down to the bottom of the foam so it's nice and secure. Yeah, and you can see that creates some nice sort of anchor points for my other bits, like these lovely lichen twigs. And with the lichen twigs, you can see, just put them over, use the twigs. And because the lichen twigs they're dead anyway, they're really lightweight, which will make them easy to work with. And again, I'm going to use the paper covered wire just to hold those in place. You can see already here I don't even really need to fix that. So that's not a worry at all. So just join them where you need to join them. And then try and get some depth in there. So move some so the branches go forward and bits where some of the pieces go backwards. See here, that gives me a nice little connection point there onto that twig. Make that nice and tight. Yeah, even though that one's sticking up a little bit, I don't think that's a problem. Because you don't want to create it completely flat. Yeah, I've got another. Swizzle that one diagonally the other way. Tying different bits together, it's just a good way of supporting the whole thing. You have a look at where the good points are. You can make things like at the moment, that twig naturally sits there, but if I pull that to the front, that allows me to have that where I want it to be. So that's what I'm going to do. And now, yeah, if you're going to make this, you have to make a decision at some point whether you're going to make this all round or whether you're going to make it one-sided. And I think, yeah, obviously if you make it all round, you keep on having to look at it from both sides. But I'm going to make it one-sided, and you can see that you kind of look onto it more that way, whereas at the moment, that does look like the back because it naturally comes up. Now for a little bit of interest, see, I think that might be quite nice coming from a slightly lower point. So you create a space, and that will allow you to work in that space later on. Now we add a little bit of that lovely texture, and this is where you can see how that's going to work, I think. I hope so anyway. Again, I'm just going to let that sort of find its own way through. And because we've got that whole little structure of the lichen twigs, you can see that I could even just balance that on there, but I am going to attach it because otherwise it'll probably move later on. And I'll let these bits sort of come out so that they show themselves off, or themselves off. All those lovely little buds. And as I said, this was oak tree, from the oak tree. And I've got a lovely bit of movement on that one. So I'm going to make use of that as well. Just fiddle that through a little bit. You can sit there and spend a lot of time thinking about all these things, about exactly how every branch will look. But I would say just let it evolve naturally. Do the main bit first and just get it stuck in, and then you can have a little fiddle later on. You can see now that I've got this lovely depth on it, and that gives it more interest. If you get it very narrow, unless you haven't got the space, it just doesn't have all the interest. So try and get some bits like that come forward. If I just take that out, hopefully you'll see the difference it makes. And now this is sort of very bare. So just adding that little bit there. Just gives a little bit extra depth. Yeah, you might think, oh well, you know, I must be used to doing this, so it's very easy for me, and you might be a little bit daunted at the prospect of doing something like this. But if you like it, just give it a go. You'll honestly surprise yourself. But as I say, don't be too hard on yourself by thinking everything has to be just so. I'm just trying to find a slightly smaller branch, smaller twig, because I think I'm trying to get this mixed through. So I want that lovely combination of the lichen and those buds to be quite mixed. And it is messy, this, but I think that's part of its charm. That gives it its natural character. And that's what the foraging bit is really useful for. Because so often we work with commercially cut flowers and they're so perfect that that little bit of Mother Nature almost disappears. Now, if you're a little bit hard-handed and you've been pushing and pulling on this and this starts to become a little bit wobbly, what you can do, you will have to do this with a knife. So you can do, if the knife scares you, you can do this away from you. But it's to just, like that, you create these little shavings. Okay? And if you found that there's a little space, so if I show you here, that you've made a little bit of a hole and it's wobbled a bit, just push these into the space to fill it up. Don't take it out. Whatever you do, don't take this out and put it back in, because you'll just end up making lots of holes. So, literally, I'll show on the other side. Okay, so just move it slightly in the position you want it to go and just push that in, and that will just fill up the hole, so it'll just make it a little bit more stable. Yeah, we've got something to work with, a basic structure. You can add more later on, so once you think it looks kind of okay, then probably stop and do some of the other bits. So now we're going to do some of the nice decorating. And just have a little play with it. Get it. What I would say is get them in place first. Don't worry about the fact that that's not got anything to drink from. It hasn't got a water source. We'll fix that in a moment. Let's have that one coming right down, just for the fun of it. Tuck that behind. Now, if you think it's got too much, it's a little bit too dense with the foliage, then what you can do is just go through, cut it away. Yeah, there's always ways and means. Even on here, you think that's a little bit heavy looking, just make it a little bit sparser. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of ivy a little bit lower down here. Just see that little trail of ivy a little bit lower down there. We need to put these in water, and you really need a tube to put the end of the stem in. And there are a couple of possibilities. The first one is this little extension tube, and because we don't need the extension, I'm going to cut some of the stalk off, and you can just fill that with water, put the little cap on the top. And because it's green, it's already easier to camouflage. If you think that you don't like that, then just use a laurel leaf. And you don't even have to wrap it all the way around. If you just wrap it partially, and then if I use a little bit of wire, and then wrap that around and twist it. So you can see it's just wrapped around the tube and the leaf, and then just give it a little bit of a twist and a cut. Then you can camouflage it really well. So if I just find an end of a stem, I'll just turn that round so you can see. So it's probably just as easy for me to hide that there. So I'm going to push that into the tube, and to be honest, that can even stay like that. And from the front now, you will hardly see it. Yeah, the other option are these tubes, but because they're shiny, they have a lid, they stick out a little bit more. I have used them on the end one for the flowers, but I will show you that one at the end. So I think I'm going to stick with something like that. So, the water in there. A little cap, and again, just stick that on there, and I'm going to leave that in there. I'm just going to tie it in with a little bit of the paper covered wire to make it as unobtrusive as I can. But I think as we add more materials, it will disappear more from view anyway. And you can see I'm sort of sticking them towards the back of the design. Okay, now for the fun bit, for the egg decoration. And I've got these little broken ones again, which are already on string. So I'm just going to dot these through. These are perfect actually, because they're so easy. So you just loop them over a twig and they stay put. Now, don't forget to put some through the design and also towards the back. Now, because I've got a nice bright colour, if I put that one towards the back, again, that will just draw your eye through. Depends a little bit what angle you're looking at it from, but it should work. Now, you can do lots of little things. This is where a glue gun comes in really useful, because with a glue gun you can stick things anywhere. So these little nests are really nice as a little decorational thing, and because they're so lightweight you could probably wedge them in. But if you just put a little dab of glue in two places, then you can stick those in place exactly where you want them. Got a nice little spot there, just put a little dab of glue. And you can do the same with the little quail's eggs. Again, you put a tiny little dollop of glue, a little line like that, and then put them onto the twig. Just keep hold of them for 2 ticks, and those will sit on there nice and securely. Now that I've done one, I think I should probably do just a couple more. And what I've done with the feathers, because some of the feathers are really long, and I think they're probably a little bit too long for my liking. So all I do, chop them in half, just make sure that you pull away any fluffy bits, otherwise you'll end up with fluffy bits floating everywhere. The feathers are so lightweight, so it's just so easy to just do this. And these little cream feathers are perfect in terms of the colouring with the rest of the arrangement. So now we come really to sort of finishing it off. We've got all the basic bits in place. So first of all, what I'm going to start on is the base here. And there are a couple of things. You can see that here I introduced these grasses. And if you saw the foraging video from last week, then you would have seen me refer to those, because I cut them from the garden and I didn't want to throw them away. And what they actually do is, in a very subtle way, is they connect the base here to the canopy. So you can see the canopy cuts that lovely vertical line in half. And you could do the same with something like this, like an old steeper grass. That would do the same trick. So I'm just going to add these two, because this is all I had left on my grass after the winter. Coming through. So there's just a little bit of that vertical. Take that one down a bit further. Just come over slightly. There we are. That sits just in there. And then you can see that with this sample one, I did the base all in moss. And now there's little options here, because to show you something different, I just got basically some wood chip, that you might have in the garden or around the property somewhere, or you might have a bag of it in your cupboard. And also this lovely material here, which is lichen moss. This is commercially bought, it's dried, but it's also really beautifully textured. But I just want to show you something different, because if you haven't got anything, and this works also on green foam, what you can do is, if you rub this foam, it almost becomes velvet. So that you almost start creating this very sculpted part, but it stops it from looking like foam. You don't have to apply too much pressure. I'm going to show you part of it with wood chip. And you could do a little bit of one and a little bit of the other if you like. Oops, white grass there, be a little bit careful. Or you can do a combination of, because you could always do a little bit of the lichen as well. This is just very beautiful material to use. So, there are different options as to what you can do. Now, you can see I haven't really got any flowers except for the daffodils in this one. And if you want to use daffodils and you want to have some kind of flower, you can either insert them into the foam, but if you can't insert them into the foam, then if you cut through the tube a little bit further up, this one is very, there we go, in the end, get there, cut that round. And this is again to support the flowers. Let me just see where I want to have them. I think I have them there. So if I turn that around, and I use the tube now to go right to the bottom of the foam and really push it down and twist it. And then what I'm trying to achieve is that the foam comes out with the tube. So now I take the foam out, put the tube back in. I need to cut that down a little bit more. I'm going to use the scissors this time. Just so that when I put that in, what I don't want to really have is the tube too much on show. And then I can just add a few flowers in there. And again, I'm going to use the daffodils, but I'm going to use them really short. That was another one in there, which will hopefully fill the tube up a little bit more. There. Yeah, if they're still wobbling about, then use a little piece of, I haven't got any more daffodils now, so I'm just going to put a little stick in there to fill up the space and keep them in place. Again, just add a little bit of the wood chip around there, and that will make sure that they sit securely, because it's very difficult to get, it's very difficult, it's well, practically impossible to push the daffodils into the foam. That's the reason why I just wanted to show you that. So I'm going to move these aside. And just with these little seed heads of hydrangea, you can see how well they work by just adding a little bit of density to the overall design. And I'm literally going to take the stem off and then just wedge these in place. It'll give it slightly a bit more weight in the centre, so you'll have empty parts and then slightly fuller parts. There we go, like so. Now, I think the final thing is if you want to have some flowers in the canopy itself, like I did here with the tulips. And the way I did that is to use these little perspex tubes. The only trouble with the perspex tubes is that they don't have a lip on. So if you wire them, the wire slips off really easily. So the way to get around that is to use a little bit of this wax tape and then put that around the top, wrap that around the top of the tube, just like a little collar, so that you have it like that. And this wax tape is really good because it's also kind of non-slip, and the tape itself stops it from slipping off. So I'm just going to cross those wires, wrap the wire around, cross the wires over, and then grab them like there, and pull that as tight as I can, and then twist that a couple of times. And now I can just add these wherever I want them. And I just wrap them around a twig, make it nice and tight. The wire allows me to really put it where I want, which is great. And then I fill the tube with some water. Make sure that you always try and cut nice long stems on there, so that the stem, even when the water starts to go down, the flower still has some water. Yeah, and then that way you can just add a couple of flowers just to finish off your arrangement if you want some flower up in the top part. And there you have a canopy arrangement. So something different for Easter, and I hope you enjoy making that. So maybe just to reiterate the steps, yeah, obviously put your foam in, make it a little bit organic in shape, get your uprights in, make sure you get that flat wedge shape on your stems so they're nice and secure. Add the thin lichen branches or another like quite lightweight branch, make a structure, go back forwards and go backwards to get some depth. Then you add your contrast, little seedy or your buddy type arrangement, which I use the oak for. Once you have all that in place, put through the greenery, so whether you use ivy or passion flower, jasmine, that's up to you, and make sure you put those in water. Then we start to add some of the decoration, the eggs, the feathers, nests, little quail eggs here and there, and then start to, maybe if you've got something like the hydrangea, that's probably the best. Otherwise, you can always add a little bit more foliage for the density part of it. And then finally, add some flowers in the base, in the tube if you like, if you want some in the top, in the test tubes, and finish off covering the floral foam with moss or with leaves or lichen or wood chip, or even soil is another thing you can use. So, and then you're all set for Easter. I hope I've given you some inspiration with some different designs and something to really have a play with. You've got a good few days before Easter, so go and have some fun. I hope you will come back and see what I'm going to do next, because I will be. Please press that little subscribe button, I think over in that left-hand corner, or from when you're looking at me at the right-hand corner. And let's hope the flower workshops that I do here, let's hope we can soon start flowering again for real.